Am I ever excited? Welcome to the 10th episode of The Skeleton Key. The cake. This is what I've been waiting for. The 10th episode. And I'm very, very happy to be making it. The 10th episode has been called The Cake from the very beginning. I'm not exactly sure why, but the closest thing to an explanation is that a cake sometimes has layers, stacked on top of each other. And a cake is also a delicious treat, a celebration to share. So, where do I begin? There are a lot of things on the screen right now. I want to quickly point out this funny little spring diagram on the left. The skeleton key, as it appears with the sort of four squares or the cross, looking at it, we see these, the green and red symbol and the sort of figure eight in the middle. If we take that horizontal line and plumb it straight down the middle of that spring, that's what we're looking at. So the left side, or the generative side of the skeleton key, is actually an ascendant spiral towards the higher self. And the degenerative side, likewise, will go to the lowest self, whilst the figure eight is representing a sort of stasis or a maintenance of the current position. Because for every ascension, there's an equal descension. So yeah, hopefully we can keep that in the back of our minds every time we see a skeleton key. Is that the generative cycle is slowly bringing us towards a higher consciousness and eventually towards the highest iteration of the self. Imagine a TV with like 100 channels. And on one channel, you're being chased by a bear. On another channel, you've won the Nobel Prize. And on another channel, you're living in the suburbs with two kids. That every possible iteration of your life, every conceivable iteration of your life has already happened. And depending on what channel you're on, that's what you're tuning into. And this highest self is basically the one channel where absolutely everything is at its most ideal, which makes the generative cycle of the skeleton key a sort of manual way of approaching that highest self, or you could say the mechanism of approaching the highest self, as opposed to just manifesting it or being born into it. I think that's enough on that, and you can ask if you want me to say something else about it, but really it's just a fucking spring. Let's have a look here at our cake. The cake is really, all the cake is me taking basically all of the skeleton keys I've made and just putting them into the same skeleton key at the same time, not as a fractal, but on top of each other, hence the name. And what it's trying to show is that every skeleton key really is just adding breadth and depth to the same four states of being. Every entity exists in one of these four states of being, in the positive or the negative or the shadows of each. And I plan to make another episode in the future talking more about that and the yin and yang and all of that stuff, the sort of background concepts to this. But for now, we've got this idea that every skeleton key, first, that we can make a skeleton key of virtually everything, and that as it continues, every skeleton key can go on top of every other skeleton key and slot into the same slots at the same time to create a breadth and depth of meaning for every concept. And last episode we talked about how it's also a fractal. But anyway, let's have a look at it. There are some in here that I don't have episodes on yet, and maybe I won't even do I guess eventually I'll get to everything. But as it stands, it's pretty neat. So I trust that it feels intuitive how most of these slot in together, where growth can be considered a type of work. And we know that flow states are where the growth happens, and that growth is approaching an ideal. And if you're growing, you're feeling happy. Things like that. And with destruction, obviously, you're dissatisfied with something. And that's a pessimism. That's or you could even say a realism, to see what's actually there. And maybe that is a sadness. Something that might not make sense is how fear and relaxation come together in the same slot. I was looking at that and I kept muscle testing. It was like, no, it goes in the same slot. I was like, are you sure, buddy? Are you 100? And it was 100. And what I'm tempted to say is that this is not relaxation in the typical sense that we think of, oh, like I'm calm. Yeah, you probably are calm. But it's relaxation relative to the skeleton key of the flow state, which means that if you recall that episode, the first episode, it's talking specifically about a state of very low difficulty and very high skills, which makes an activity relaxing. And that might not be obvious what such a relaxing activity is. I think at the time I talked about doodling or something. And not to make this episode about flow states, but just quickly, scrolling on the phone, doom scrolling is technically a state of apathy, not a state of relaxation. Whereas sitting outside and just fucking staring at the grass for an hour or meditating, that's a state of relaxation. But that relaxation, for anyone that's tried to sit still and just focus on thoughts or not thinking or good luck, that's actually a sort of vulnerability and openness where things float into the mind. And it's not about actively choosing what to think about. It's about allowing what was ready to be thought about to just pop in. And I think that is compatible with a fear state and the looseness and the sense of destruction, and yet also rest, because it's about receptivity and not knowing necessarily what you're going to receive, or even knowing that what you're going to receive is perhaps not good, but that you need to then do something about that. I think this is where they belong. So again, there are some in here that we haven't covered yet and that I probably will. But my invitation is just to pause the video and look at them and think about how different things, different examples of real life for yourself and things that you've done in the past and are doing now might slot into each of these. And even things in the cultural imagination and films and stories and norms that we have, how can it sort of ring true? I think there's too much information here for me to really go through them all individually, and it would be too arbitrary to pick one to talk about any more than I already have. So really, short and sweet, happy 10th episode to the Skeleton Key. That's why I'm here. How about this? Think of this video as a teaser for what's to come. I've sneakily dropped in a few skeleton keys that haven't been put in here yet, and I've given a little nod and a wink towards some of the more conceptual, abstract skeleton keys that I'll make, for example, about the yin and the yang. I don't think there's anything more to say. Have a wonderful day. Please have a wonderful day. Or, if it's not wonderful, into the nevma of the hubris of a good day and the nevma of a bad day. Now I'm taking the piss. Anyway, thank you for listening. Welcome aboard if this is the first one you watch. And ciao.